Good evening. My name is Bert Emerson, and I'm glad to welcome you here tonight for this community conversation with Mr. Michael Baumgartner, representative of Washington's 5th District. It's a hot ticket. We have put a lot out there, and they were snapped up quickly in just a couple of hours, and so hopefully we'll have a great conversation here tonight. So this evening is part of our Democracy and Discourse series here at Whitworth, which we organized this past year to take on the growing narrative about colleges and universities being places where it was increasingly difficult to have tough conversations about big issues. We have taken that narrative seriously, and we have designed programming and curricula that would engage students, faculty, staff, administrators in the challenging and often messy work of democracy. Not only expressing and engaging ideas from different viewpoints, even when they might make us feel uncomfortable, but also learning how to make decisions together, collectively, that would solve real problems and improve our shared living experience for all people. We've had countless conversations, formal and informal, in classrooms, in residence halls, in community spaces. We have learned from a host of speakers from across the political spectrum. One of these being our then State Attorney General, now Governor, Mr. Bob Ferguson. Tonight we continue that work with our students and our community, and we are excited about our guests who have gathered to join us in this important work. We all bring different perspectives here tonight. For me, that means I bring my perspective as a Christian, as a literary historian, as an educator, as a citizen. My faith convicts me to believe that all people are created in the image of God and therefore merit dignity and respect and deserve to have their voices heard. That I am called to love my neighbor as well as my enemy. That I am required to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. I am also a literary historian who studies democracy in the U.S., so I hold a bit of a long view, knowing that we have lived through periods of intense polarization, struggled to find common ground, and often failed to find ways to make decisions collectively and resorting to undemocratic solutions. I also know that our democracy has a tremendous number of checks and balances that help us course correct, not only in the branches of government, but also in the federalist system and between elected officials and the people they represent. Tonight provides us a moment to engage as a people, together. Importantly, this event does not serve as a specific endorsement of any particular person or party or set of ideas, other than the simple view that the people have a say in our governance and that we, all of us, are in this together. So our process will go like this. I will start off by inviting an opening statement. We will call out raffle numbers for oral questions. When your number is called, please move to a microphone that is nearest to you. While these folks are moving into place, there will be some time also for me to submit questions. And we will also take time for some student questions as well. There are a lot of people here. We hope to get to as many questions as possible. And so we ask speakers to keep their questions within about a minute. We have a timer over here that will help us to see, that will start from 0 and keep track of how people are going. We will work our way through questions in different ways, but we will hopefully give plenty of time for the congressman to respond to everyone's concerns tonight. Okay? So, no way I can take questions here. So we're going to start. I will be drawing these tickets out. If you have one of these questions, like I said, please move to a microphone that's in one of the 3 spaces on either side or in the back, okay? So I'm going to call out these questions. I'm going to call out the numbers, and those of you with these numbers can move to those places, and that's when we'll invite Congressman Baumgartner to start with his opening statement. Okay, So the first three numbers are all the same, so I'm only going to read the last. Okay, so you only have to remember three numbers. 582, 9, oh, that's a 3, 370, 567. Okay, so 582, 370, 567. Okay, if you could start moving that direction to the microphones, I'd like to invite Mr. Baumgartner to have an opening statement.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and certainly thank Whitworth University for hosting this, and most of all, the students who are here. What a great venue for this kind of discourse. I like doing town halls. This is my 7th town hall in my first 75 days. In general, I think town halls should be small and frequent rather than large and rare. So we're going to hope that we can continue with that theme. It's my goal this year to do, I represent all or parts of 12 counties in Eastern Washington, and it's my hope that we can do at least one town hall in every county. This year I'm fighting a little bit of a cold here, so bear with me if I'm coughing a little bit. We have 5 little kids at home, and it's kind of a germ factory at our house right now with school. And I should always say happy birthday, or not happy birthday, happy St. Patty's Day to everybody. I like those people that are wearing stuff in the crowd. I thought about wearing some green beads up here, but maybe that wouldn't fit the occasion. You know, in general, I know there's just a ton of passion, angst, some excitement, some anger of folks right now with what's coming out of Washington, D.C. And really, I think all of that is healthy for our republic. The challenge, I'm in general very optimistic about the future of America and what we have been and what we can be. I do really worry about the partisan divide in our country and the hyperpartisanship and the anger and some of that aspect. And I know that there are folks in both sides of the parties and everybody, and sometimes occasionally myself, that foster that kind of vitriol and that sort of thing. I think everybody has to try to do better on that. All I know is that, you know, my family really big into Scouts, and I always like the lessons they learned at Scouts. And what I say to my kids is, you know, you can only be responsible for your own behavior, you know, and you can only be responsible for what you want to do. So I hope that what I try to do as a member of Congress is treat everybody the way that our republic deserves to be treated, and hopefully you guys will do that as well tonight and think about what kind of country we want to be. Do we want to be a civil country that can disagree passionately without being so vitriolic and angry and rude to each other? But ultimately, I do know that there's, and it's okay that there's a lot of passion here tonight. So I believe strongly in town halls. Just in general, and I represent all of you, so that includes the 61% of you that voted for me and the 39% who didn't. You know, I work for all of you and try to represent all of you. Doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but all of your interests and your values and your concerns and cares have a lot of merit, and we try to respect all of them. In the big picture, one of the reasons what I went to Washington, D.C., what I see are the problems in our country and kind of the big picture. I think our founding fathers were geniuses in the sense that they realized that human beings are flawed individuals, so they devised a system that divides power. But the way that our system should work is that too much power has gone to Washington, D.C., and it should be at the state and local level. So I don't think founders ever envisioned that Washington, D.C. would be making as many decisions there. So big picture, I'm trying to push back to the state and local level because we're a country of over 300 million people, very diverse people. And the way we stay unified is allowing space for each other to have differences, and not everybody has to live the same way that other people think they should live, and that's how we respect our federal system. And then within Washington, D.C., you know, I'm an Article 1 person. I think the Congress, because it's the People's House, should be the strongest entity in Washington, D.C., and I don't think the founders ever imagined that the Congress would give away so much authority to the executive branch and then by extension the judiciary. So, and we'll talk about that, but in the big picture, you know, so we frame these questions, know that those are kind of my two overall goals is to try to push stuff back to the state and local level, and then try to reassert Congress's Article 1 authority. Now, within the big challenges that we're trying to solve in this country, amongst the big challenges, we have some global threats that are not going away and are getting more complex. We face the most complex and dangerous set of international challenges probably since World War II, even maybe more complicated than that. And then we have really an unsustainable budget situation in this country. We have $37 trillion in debt. Almost done with the opening statement. We'll get right to those questions. And it's okay. I don't mind if you just want to make a statement as well, too, when you're in the microphone, because that's all right, too. It's your guys' town hall. But in any event, so the big picture, so two things, and then we're trying to, the big picture I saw, $37 trillion in debt is not fair to our kids. And we've come off a period now where, unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic, government shut down everything. And then as a response to that, they flooded the economy and individuals with payments to compensate for the fact that the economy was shut down. So we really, and a lot of that money was going to be inefficiently spent, and there's going to be some problems that bloated, but we're trying to rebalance what should be the right size of the federal government and then rebalance what is a sustainable jet trajectory, because, you know, I just refuse to leave $37 trillion in debt and counting to my kids and grandkids. I don't think that's fair to what they're dealing with. So that's those international threats, that budget situation. So in that budget situation, so then just the final thing about my statements, in terms of what matters for Eastern Washington, so big picture, trying to fix the constitutional issue, worried about global threats, unsustainable budgets, and then issues that really matter to Eastern Washington, which is here are rural areas and rural health, that matters a lot. Fairchild Air Force Base, we have more veterans in Eastern Washington than almost any other area. And then just trying to represent all of you guys and the things that you care about. So there you go. There's my long opening statement. And let's go to the questions. And it's perfectly fine by me if you just want to stand up and make a comment as well, too.
We will try to stick with the order that we had. I see only one person at microphones. So I will call out two more quick tickets to try to get. If you have 195, you can move to the microphone in the middle or to this side. And 343, we'll start with this question over here.
Senator said that Trump is defying court orders and abusing wartime powers to deport people with no due process. We are not at war, and Donald Trump is not a king. He is not above the law. What will you do to make sure he doesn't defy court orders and make a stand for the Constitution and democracy?
Well, so you certainly have playing out right now an Article 1 versus Article 2 sort of tension. You know, Article 1, Congress is the People's House. Article 2 says executive authority is entrusted in a president. And within the powers of the president, you know, the top line authority that he has is national security, is the commander in chief. So you know, it's not good, it's not healthy for the Republic to have court orders that are not being obeyed. It's also, It's also not healthy for the Republic when you have district judges that probably don't have the authority issuing national-wide injunctions. So let's get... So, and you've seen this with, each and every president. So just as Joe Biden... You know what? Probably not a lot of lessons for the kids scout troop right now. But listen, when Joe Biden was doing stuff like so.
Let the congressman answer, please.
So, for example, when each president, when Joe Biden decided to unilaterally relieve student debt, you may have agreed with the process.
Okay, we have a second question over from this side, I believe.
Oh, that makes it very awkward.
Let's get to more questions, please.
My question's about Social Security, Mike. Hardworking Americans have been paying into Social Security Trust Fund since we were teenagers. The promise was that those trust fund dollars would support our grandparents and our parents, and eventually one day we would be supported as well. This administration is firing staff, closing offices, and are on the path towards privatizing Social Security, absolutely following the Project 2025 blueprint. While Social Security remains one of the most effective programs in the U.S. with the least amount of fraud of any agency. If millionaires and billionaires paid their fair share in Social Security contributions,
Please let her
our
ask the
trust
question.
fund would be solvent. I timed it. It's 45 seconds. Be quiet. Will you commit to supporting legislation that raises the unfair cap on Social Security taxes so that millionaires and billionaires actually paid their fair share? Yes or no?
So we're certainly not touching Social Security, and there's going to be no cuts to benefits. Okay. And no, I don't support increasing that tax. Next question. I just say that we just came off an election. We did 7 debates in the election. This question came up in every debate that I did, and I had the exact same answer. So. No, I do not support increasing the Social Security tax.
Okay, so now I have, we have a couple of student questions that I'm going to ask to move to the mics, but first, a question from some of our written submissions. This is from Shade about the topic of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. The question reads, I want to start by thanking you for holding this town hall today. DOGE claims to have already saved the American taxpayer more than $115 billion. But as of this morning, its published receipts amount to less than 35. Of the receipts which have been published, many contain material inaccuracies and overstatements. Do you believe the figures reported by Elon Musk and his agency to be accurate?
So the important thing that has to happen with the DOGE cuts is that guys, there are a lot of college students here, and this is at the end of the day, it's supposed to be a civics event directed towards the college students. So, I mean, can you all just stand up and yell real loud for a little while and get it out of your system a little bit so we can actually have a conversation? So, let me say this about DOGE. Okay, so it is appropriate, just as like Bill Clinton and every other president has done, to look at trying to cut waste, fraud, and abuse from government. And again, some of the things that government is doing are good things, but we just can't afford them as much anymore. Again, the $37 trillion in debt is a real issue. But what's important with the DOGE cuts is that that money doesn't go away just because DOGE identifies it. It has to come back to Congress that has the power of the purse to do what would be called rescissions. So if the executive branch identifies some spending, it doesn't mean that the money goes away. But there is an opportunity in something called rescissions where the Congress can then reduce that. And, DOGE has made some mistakes. I mean, they have talked about that. So that's why I was one of the legislators in a bipartisan fashion that supported a bill that said if someone is mistakenly fired by the executive branch during their probationary period and then rehired, they wouldn't lose their probationary status. I think that's just common sense. So, yeah. Well, I mean, the president is the head of the executive branch, so he gets to run the executive branch. But I certainly want to live in a republic where if the Congress says that the executive branch should spend money, that they need to spend that money. So, again, it does have to go back to Congress, and that's how the process should work.
Okay, I have a second written submission. And again, if students could move to the microphones to be prepared to ask their questions next. The second question comes from Haley in the topic of the category of the Constitution. As a mother of 3, I'm afraid that my children won't have as many rights as I have right now. The current administration is saying it's illegal to peacefully protest in front of Tesla, that it's illegal for networks such as CNN to speak out against Trump, that funding will be pulled from colleges that allow peaceful protests. How do you plan to protect our liberties in the Constitution?
So, our First Amendment right is our First Amendment. Our first most important right is our First Amendment right. Everything else follows from that, and we're getting I mean this sincerely, a good example of that here tonight. You guys certainly have the right to address your government and share your opinions as well too. I think that you know, what's clear is when it crosses the line into violence or support for terrorism or when it marginalizes the rights of other folks. And so, So we know when it comes just on the college campus, you know, on the college campus issue, just because we're on a college campus, you know, I think you really saw some dangerous and egregious violation of the rights of some of our Jewish students. Well, I think if you spoke on a one-on-one basis with some of the Jewish students at Columbia University and other campuses, you would be convinced that what they were subjected to was not people expressing the First Amendment rights, that they were subjected to terrorism and harassment and really infringed upon their rights. So that really is the balance that the government, you know, is trying to strike, that we should all be trying to strike, is expression of your First Amendment.
Okay, at this time, can we move to the student questions? Okay, we have a couple of students who have prepared questions for tonight, so if we can start with those. We will take both student questions together, and I think that you can respond to both.
Hi, thank you for coming here tonight. I want to dig a little deeper into something you brought up at the beginning, and that's come up a few times. After the president's joint address to Congress, you said, the American people know who president about what civility means. So first, can you define more civil discourse? And second, how do we change our discourse going forward? As an elected official, what do you think your role is in that change, especially, as you noted, our highest officials themselves are using less than civil rhetoric? What can we do as citizens, and what can institutions like Whitworth do?
Thank you. That's a excellent question.
Second question.
I think we're going to try to do
take
three.
Two.
And then,
these are
yeah.
connected, so.
Time to be here today.
I'd love to hear your year in major as well, too.
Sure. My name's Dylan. I'm a senior studying political science and environmental studies. My question is, the current presidential administration has taken significant measures to unilaterally rescind or impound non-discretionary funding, which conflicts with its political priorities. This has been happening since Ukraine in 2019 with Trump. And as you mentioned, the branches of government were never designed to be co-equal. These executive orders stand in stark tension with Article 1, Section 8 of the US Constitution, which establishes Congress as the branch solely responsible for matters of taxation and spending. So how will you leverage your personal fiscal policy expertise from regional and statewide office to help return Congress to its constitutional authority on budgetary matters? Thank you.
Oh, those two. Okay. Great question, but I mean, they're both great questions, and I'm not surprised that Whitworth students ask great questions. Yeah, I got smart students here. But yeah, so on the civility issue, you know, I think we all know what civility is. It's treating each other as you want to be treated, you know, when you're trying to engage in controversial issues. You know, a lot of times it would be how you would talk to each other at a coffee shop or on an individual basis. I think as I've been in politics, this is I've been 8 years in the state Senate and 6 years as your county treasurer, so this is now my 15th year. You know, the more social media there has been, the more visceral sometimes things have gotten. And I know that if you're always hitting that real outrage machine on the red meat stuff on social media, it can be a little bit like a drug to politicians or even to people individually, that they check their likes. And you can get the most sort of extreme thing you say can get the most likes. And politicians tend to find that doing the more extreme stuff online, or the more extreme posts or flamboyant or bombastic posts, tends to aid their fundraising, because people react to when you talk about the other side as the enemy, or it's not that we disagree, it's that you're evil, and that's really a lot of the, that's where a lot of the civility, kind of breaks down. And there's some folks that frankly are in Congress that are a little bit more like reality TV stars than they are like serving members of Congress. But, yeah. So, how do we fix it? It's kind of like what I started with. Like, ultimately, like I tell my kids, you can only be responsible for your own behavior and try to set the model. And, sometimes I think of something that would be pretty popular or bombastic or as a tweet and that kind of thing. I think, well, do I really need to send this thing today, or could it be tomorrow? So I think that's, some of the way that we have to do it. But ultimately, our republic will only be what we as a people want it to be. And if we want it to be a republic where people scream and shout at each other and do threats and all this kind of stuff, then it's going to be tit for tat, and it's probably not a great future. So, yeah. On the question about the question about the Article 2 versus Article 1 and Congress resetting, its authority. I think it's inevitable that the Supreme Court is going to have to decide, a lot of this stuff. As I know it's not popular in this group, but for example, when President Biden unilaterally relieves student debt, that's a taxation issue. So, and then you've seen. Yeah, my point is just that you've always had these tensions from the executive branch, and I'm trying to put the congressional branch back in. Ultimately, if a government entity has been created by Congress, it has to be dissolved by Congress. And so you really have to, we have to, I want to reduce government spending, I want to reduce inefficiencies, and so we need to be doing rescissions and other parts of the budget that will catch up with that, ultimately, in terms of how we do that. So I don't know. There's not in our constitutional system, that's the checks and balances of how it works. Congress has to have the power of the purse.
Okay, we're going to move to more questions, oral questions. I'm going to call out 3 more raffle tickets. Again, the first 3 numbers are all the same. As you are making your way to the microphones, I will pose a written question. So these numbers, all starting with 286. I have 437, 454, and I see someone already standing at the mic. Did I call your number? Oh, no, sorry. 5, that's a student for later. 594, 594. So 437, 454, 594. Please move to the mic that is nearest to you. And while those people are moving in that place, let me ask you this question that comes from May under the topic heading of Immigration and Refugee Resettlement. Here's the question. Hundreds of your constituents came to Eastern Washington seeking escape from danger in faraway lands, many with promises from the military to keep them and their families safe in recognition of their wartime service to U.S. operations overseas. This administration has defunded all refugee resettlement programs, leaving refugee families in limbo, trying to navigate complex systems without help, as Americans are being fired from agencies who have been helping refugees for decades. I understand you consider yourself a Christian. How does refusing entrance to asylum-seeking refugees reflect your Christian values?
Well, that's a great question. I think those of you that know my background, that after I went to WSU and before I went to Harvard, I spent a year with the Jesuits in Mozambique working with war refugees. And the whole reason I went to Harvard to study international development, because I was interested in trying to help in places like that. And then instead, after 9/11, I went to the Middle East. And I think most of you know that, or at least some of you know, that I met my wife on a counter-narcotics team in Helmand Province. And we lived off base with a team of Afghans. And if you've read The Inlander, my wife's efforts and our efforts to try to get our Afghan colleagues that are targeted by the Taliban into the country have been chronicled. So I believe very strongly that America has to continue to support refugees, and we're have written letters of support and are doing that. You know, by the same token, you can't talk about the refugee issue without talking about the insecurity of what's happened at the southern border. And you can't talk about the southern border. Look. Yeah. And, yeah. And so, you know, we just cannot be a sovereign nation with an insecure southern border. And if you look at our community, so we had a town hall. Well, we had a town hall this morning, and there was a woman came to the town hall, and it's a story that I've heard too similarly in Eastern Washington. And she was a grandmother, and she was there wearing a T-shirt of her son who had recently died by a fentanyl overdose. And across. So the overall refugee issue is connected to the chaos at the southern border, which is impacted by the fentanyl issue. We could go into more detail. We'll go to the next question.
Okay, I have a, let's maybe go to the microphones. Maybe we can try to take multiple questions at the same time. So we'll start over there.
Oh, I'm not allowed to hold it myself. On March 10th, ICE and HHS agents in 6 unmarked vehicles surrounded the vehicle of Jason Ruiz Rodriguez, his wife, Kayla Somariba, a U.S. citizen, and Cesar Ruiz Rodriguez, his brother, while they were on their way to a court hearing at the Spokane County Courthouse. The agents demanded that Jason and Cesar exit the vehicle, but did not produce a warrant. When the family refused to exit their vehicle, the agents proceeded to unconstitutionally break the windows of the car and violently remove the 3 occupants, including a natural-born U.S. citizen who is 7 months pregnant. The men were tasered to the point that one of them required medical attention in a hospital, and one of them was also hit in the head with a rifle. Were you aware of this case? If yes, what have you done to defend and restore your constituents' constitutional rights? If not, what will you do now that you have been made aware of this unconstitutional, violent, and illegal act by ICE and HHS agents in your district?
I could, yeah. So I'm going to take, I didn't ask who in this room voted for Donald Trump, but raise your hand if you voted for Donald Trump. Yeah. Great, okay. So we got, yeah. So you're not going to like this answer, but it would be far better for the security of the state of Washington and for immigrants in the state of Washington if Washington was not a sanctuary state. Because what happens is, for ICE, what happens is, if there's the folks that are bad actors, and they're not all bad actors, but the folks that are criminals in the bad actor element, when they're not allowed to get into the jails to take those guys, when they're not allowed to go into the jails to get those guys, then they're put out on the street without ICE being told. That means they have to make apprehensions in the street. That's more dangerous. That's more dangerous for the officers, for the federal agents, and it's more dangerous for the immigrants. And it means that instead of being able to focus resources on the truly dangerous element, so that would be a piece of it.
Anything specific on, is anything specific on this specific case, or? No. Was there another question from a raffle ticket?
Yeah, I'm not laughing at the questions. I'm laughing at the irony of being told to answer the question, then trying to answer the question and getting interrupted like repeatedly. That's the. But look, guys, I do want you to know. I mean, I really mean this sincerely. I mean this sincerely. Is that I really enjoy doing these town halls, and I really do enjoy the back and forth, the exchange. I mean, for a lot of you folks that are here, and it's all right, because I feel the same way in the state of Washington when I feel like my views aren't represented from Olympia. It's just frustrating when your side loses. And the fact that Donald Trump won the district, and the fact that Eastern Washington leans conservative, and the fact that most of these policies are strongly supported by the overall folks, I know that creates angst and some passion on it. All right, let's keep it going.
Let's get to the next question, please.
Can you just, I don't know what part of that I didn't answer, and if you can just give me
What are
the
you gonna
question
do
and
on
then not
behalf of
interrupt,
that
I'll.
family? I asked a three-part question, but the first one was a yes or no. Were you aware of the incident that I spoke about? If you were, what have you done? If you were not aware, what will you do now that you are aware? Because your constituents' civil rights were violated violently by ICE and HHS agents. That's what I asked. What are you going to do?
I am not aware of the details of that case. Okay. But in general, it will be better if Washington State were to work with federal immigration authorities. So that is one of the things that I'm going to do, is attempt to make that happen.
There was a.
Guys, when you're an elected member of Congress, oftentimes you got to, before you can just comment on something, you got to learn a little bit more. But not everything is as you read in the newspaper or the details underneath. I think.
Okay, we would like to get to a next question, please.
In the same election in the fall that elected you, our representative, Washington also overwhelmingly affirmed their desire for the Climate Commitment Act. And my question and point is, your constituency here in Washington State feels that the environment is a top priority for their well-being now and into the future, perhaps even more than the pet project of saving all the gazillions for the millionaires. And there's so much cost going to be involved in if we don't deal with the climate. So what I see, something I've been working on my entire adult life, has been, thanks to Richard Nixon, the EPA, and following clean air, clean water, all of this is being dismantled to benefit the wealthy, not your children, not my grandchildren, or the children of the forest. So will you be a voice for the future as far as preserving our environment, as well as bringing on board probably the biggest business opportunity, which would be clean energy, sustainable energy going into the future? So it may really attract your tech bros. I grew up in the Silicon Valley, so I know who you're talking about. But my point is, will you please, I'm begging you, I would be happy to be on bended knee. Will you be a climate warrior for all of us?
I don't think in the way that you would like me to be, but I do think we have some shared, I do think, our Venn diagram overlaps on things like hydropower and nuclear power, where we're going to need to have more investments in Eastern Washington, given the amount of energy that the state and this country are going to need. And then, you're quite right that the state as a whole ratified those things, but of course there's different people in different parts of the state. Where I represent is Eastern Washington, and those things, yeah. So, look, and so, I mean, the fact is Donald Trump got over 55% of the vote in Eastern Washington. I got over 61% of the vote, and so, and both of us were quite clear, on this issue of whether we support increased environmental regulation, these sorts of things. I don't. I think one of the best things that's happened from this administration is what Lee Zeldin at EPA just announced in terms of rolling back the job-killing regulation that is on things like stream lows. So we would agree to disagree on that issue, but I think with hydro and nuke, we have some commonality that we'll be working on.
Is there another raffle ticket question over on this side? No? Yes or no? Okay.
I've been in Spokane for 39 years from New Jersey. I've never been involved in politics before, but this is getting really scary. Okay, so the things that frighten me is the way this insane president talks about Canada as a 51st state, taking Panama by force, and buying Greenland. How does this person qualify as sane? Why is he not being impeached right now?
So, in short, I don't support us absorbing Canada. Canada, that would be like taking. Canada's been a good neighbor. Canada is much more liberal and left wing than the United States. If we took Canada, taking Canada would be like taking another California. It would tilt things towards the Democrats. Yeah. If we took Canada, the Republicans would never have control again, so we don't want that to happen. On the other two, if we could get Greenland peacefully, I'm all for it, and we should have never given up Panama. So just on those issues, one thing to keep in mind. I don't know this for a fact, but I think one of the reasons that Donald Trump talks so much about Canada and Greenland is with all the AI stuff that is happening, and we're in a real arms race versus China on artificial intelligence, and it's going to take a lot of government oversight because the AI stuff could be very scary. To have autonomous computers making decisions, it's a real threat if it's not properly managed, but there's also a defense element to it. But the AI stuff takes an immense amount of power. It will take an immense amount of power in this arms race on artificial, much more than the grid can supply now, and much more than solar or wind or those kind of things could happen. So AI, one of the reasons the tech guys are so interested, are getting interested in nuclear power again, is because of the AI. And the other most efficient source of power is hydro. So where you have snowpack and elevation change, that makes hydro a lot more valuable. And so what I think is the reason that Donald Trump is so interested in talking about Greenland and Canada is because it's with an eye on the immense amount of power that's going to happen in the AI race and for the hydro resources.
Okay, we are now going to turn to two more student questions. We will lead. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay. Hello, my name is Annika. I'm a senior here and a nursing student. Thank you. Just want to say thank you so much for being here and opening up this space just for questions. In healthcare, I've been working to care for some of our nation's most vulnerable people, and the current administration's decisions and policy changes have been incredibly devastating to the people that I'm serving, and left me and so many others feeling really frustrated trying to support people who have very little. And as a person elected by the people here, and here to represent and protect Eastern Washington, you have an incredible opportunity to really stand against injustice and fight to protect the people that you're serving, and just in changes we see in healthcare. It's really scary also to look at my future and just caring for people. And so how are you going to work to really protect the people that you're serving?
Well, you've picked a great career for job security because as the demographics continue to age, we're going to continue to need more healthcare professionals. One of my proudest accomplishments when I was in the state legislature was when we did the new WSU Medical School, because we need more rural health, and supporting rural health will be a particularly big aspect of what we'll try to do here in the in Congress. Well, so. We need to make sure, so Medicare and Social Security are not being touched. Well, they're not. If we had the interest, I would walk you through how the reconciliation bills would go and the civics behind it, but that may be a little stretch for right now. So Medicaid right now is a broken system that needs to be improved to protect the truly most needy. So there's going to be no reduction in overall dollars to Medicaid. There may not be the rapid increase that some folks would like. And it's on an unsustainable spending path. So again, if you look at what Bill Clinton did in the 90s with welfare reform, things like having work requirements for Medicaid. I'm guessing this crowd would think universal health care or socialized medicine is a good idea. We would agree to disagree on that issue. I don't think putting the U.S. government more in charge of things. So, the things that we want to work on healthcare are things that bring costs down, like wellness, transparency and costs, and other. Yeah. So. Anyway, in answer to your question, thank you for pursuing the career that you're pursuing. We're going to need you. We're going to need more of folks like you. What we have to do as policymakers is make sure that we have programs that truly serve the most needy, and that you have the tools to do what you need to do, and particularly that our rural areas are supported with health care. That'll be a real focus of mine as well.
We have a second student question.
Mr. Baumgartner, though I strongly disagree with many of your choices thus far as my representative, one area that we may find agreement on is the First Amendment. You have claimed to prioritize protecting the right to free speech for all Americans, which you called the bedrock of American democracy. This is why I stand here on my university's campus, extremely disappointed in your statements about protests on college campuses. Hold up. Thank you. I want to make sure I have enough time to say everything. And I want to hear from him, so please let him speak, regardless of how much I might disagree with what he has to say. Over the past year, students across this country have organized and challenged their university's investment in Israel's apartheid state and the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. You have misrepresented these organized protests as always anti-Semitic, despite the prominent leadership of Jewish students and everything they've provided throughout these nonviolent demonstrations. From the 1960s civil rights and anti-war movements to the divestment campaigns against South Africa's apartheid in the 1990s, the First Amendment has constantly supported the rights of college students like myself to organize for the purpose of advancing fundamental human rights here and abroad. Will you commit to defending the rights of all Americans to speak and organize freely, or are you going to continue to support efforts to punish universities and students especially for protesting the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and any other organized protest that's going to occur as this administration continues to harm the well-being of the majority of this country?
I mean, I think college campuses should be places for, every place should be a bastion of free speech, and college campuses should be included. I think what college campuses need to do, I mean, since you're generally interested in the subject, I think what the University of Chicago has done is in the Chicago Statement, and what the University of Florida have done of setting real parameters that you can have free speech, but when you have protests that interrupts the learning opportunities of other students, that's where it crosses the line. And certainly not all, but significant parts of those protests at Columbia and other colleges were anti-Semitic and were support for terrorist regimes. And you and I may disagree. That may not be what's in your heart. That may not be what's in your heart, and the reason you protest, and you should have the right to speak freely on that issue. But there has been a lot of stuff that's gone on to college campuses that has been a distraction from the core function of college campuses and core degree promotion. And because yeah. So I think, you know, the issue on the protests is free speech is fine, but free speech for everyone, but make sure that it doesn't impugn other folks' ability to learn, and that it doesn't get violent, and that it's not support for terrorism or it's not anti-Semitic. And I don't think that's particularly complicated.
May I ask then, would you then condemn the actions of different civil rights organizers throughout history who, such as in Montgomery, disrupted everything about the city's finances and their ability to operate economically? Because, hold on. Would you then condemn that? Because, quite honestly, it's the only reason that those movements were effective in making it so that people could equally speak. Martin Luther King wasn't a hero until he died and his words were co-opted. So, do you want to continue to oppress the free speech like people who were in government in the past did in a racist, bigotry way?
I know. I know you have a lot of goodness in your heart. I mean this sincerely when you ask this question, but what happened to those Jewish students and the way they were targeted, the way they were made to feel afraid, the way they was just not right. And the college campuses tolerate it. And so again, you know, the free speech aspects are fine, but I think if you look deeper and you visited with some of those students, you would find a little different situation on those campuses. And I 100% do not support the BDS movement for college campuses. What I want them to... Well, I think you're making a false equivalence. I think you're making a false equivalence between what Martin Luther King did in the Montgomery protests and our civil rights movement and what happened on these college campuses. I just don't accept the premise.
Okay, we are running short on time, and so I would like to just invite two more raffle tickets, 579 and 378. If you can move to the microphone, we will try to get to your questions if time permits. As you are moving to the microphone, I'll just ask one of the written submissions. This is under the category of foreign policy from Cheyenne. The question is, the recent freeze on USAID funding has halted the distribution of HIV/AIDS treatment in many countries that rely on it for life-saving care. The World Health Organization Director General has warned that thousands will lose access to critical medication, potentially setting back progress in fighting the disease by 20 years. Given the bipartisan history of support for PEPFAR and global HIV/AIDS relief, do you believe these cuts align with American values? What is the current conversation in Congress regarding the issue, and does the Republican Party have a plan to protect access to treatment?
Yeah, I think PEPFAR is one of the best things. I think George W. Bush probably deserves the Nobel Prize for what he did for AIDS and HIV in Africa. So I have some history with USAID in their programs. The key for USAID, so it is an important program. PEPFAR program has a lot of fans amongst Republicans. You know, the thing about our aid efforts is that it can't be seen as charity. It has to be brought in line of U.S. national security. And so when AID was set up, I mean, AID was set up by JFK to fight communism. And any of us that have been in a war zone that have, and I'm not a veteran, but as a State Department guy in both Iraq and Afghanistan and some other tough places, you know that you can't just shoot your way out of a war. There has to be a development aspect to it as well. And so there is going to be ongoing U.S. development dollars. The challenge with USAID to some extent is it thought of itself as an unaccountable charity, and so it needs to be brought under the State Department, and then other aspects need to be brought under DOD, quite frankly. And so that'll be, so we didn't really get into what committees I'm on, but I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee, which is very good for our district, given that we have Fairchild Air Force Base is very geopolitically strategic, and we're very international in this district, and Washington State in general, very trade-oriented. Eastern Washington is very trade-oriented. All our wheat goes down to the river through those dams and out to the Pacific Rim. So Foreign Affairs is a good committee. I'm also on the Judiciary Committee, which I could speak to if anybody was interested, and then also on Education and Workforce, where I'm the Vice Chair of Higher Ed of the Higher Ed Committee.
So questions at the mic?
Hello. Thanks for opening this up again. In his letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "You may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, etc.? Isn't negotiation a better path?" You are exactly right in your call for negotiation. Indeed, this is the purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. That being said, how will you respond to the allegations that you've been using the LGBT dating app Grindr in secret?
That would be news to my wife, yeah.
We have time for one more question. We'll take it from this side. We are coming near the end of our 75 minutes, and we have time for one more question. Thank you.
Hello, Representative Baumgartner. I am Molly Hanson, and I'm a senior here at Whitworth. I'm a community health major, political science major. And I have another question about supporting your constituents. Representative Baumgartner, as one of only 2 Republicans supporting the Democratic bill aimed at assisting federal workers who lost their jobs due to mass layoffs led by Elon Musk's DOGE service, can you elaborate on your decision? How important are the jobs of federal workers in Washington State? And what steps will you take to support these workers in the face of such widespread and indiscriminate layoffs?
Well, we want a really good federal workforce. Both my parents were public sector employees. My mom was 43 years, the best kindergarten teacher in Eastern Washington. My dad was 40 years, professor at Washington State University. I've been a federal employee. I want really good, talented people spinning turbines at our hydroelectric dams. I want really talented people taking care of our veterans, really talented people guarding our nuclear stockpiles. But with that being said, we do have a bloated federal government. There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. Just one example. So, look. Okay, well, here's an example. Here's an example. So here's an example. I know almost nobody in this room voted for me, but after being elected as your representative. After being elected as your representative, we tried to get office space in the federal building. And we went down, and that's where Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray have office space. And it was almost completely empty because the majority of the federal workforce, or at least the folks there, were working from home. And you can think that's good or bad, but it was completely empty. But we were told it would take 2 years to get in my office into an empty federal government building. And basic stuff like, hey, what would it take to paint the walls? Or what if we needed to move a wall? Or what if we wanted to have a little cubby caught out there? GSA was incapable of answering those questions. It's a fundamentally broken organization. And now, with President Trump's order to send people back to work, for the first time in like 4 years, like traffic is bad again in Washington, D.C. And so, really, our staff are talking about people are missing meetings. And so anybody, our government is so large now, and anybody that's worked in a large organization where you're not promoted or compensated based on output, but based on time served, knows that there's inefficiencies in that system. You guys in your heart of heart knows that there's wasteful government spending. I mean, every president has talked about cutting it. And so anybody that's working in a large organization knows that. And again, against the backdrop of $37 trillion in debt and what we're doing. So we do need to right-size this stuff, you know, and like to the gentleman that, you know, spoke before and talked about the protest and made the joke about the dating app, I have to say that you know, in general, the American people, like, want government to be downsized. They want gangbangers and people that shouldn't be in the country, they're here illegal. They want them sent out. They want fairness. They want fairness. They want fairness for girls in college sports and high school sports. And I mean, all these issues, to the extent that you engage on them with just yelling and vitriol and this kind of stuff, it's not an effective way to talk about your policies with the American people. It's just not, you know? It may be cathartic to do this stuff, but it's not an effective way. I mean, people don't want tantrums. What they want is plans to govern.
As one final question as we conclude, maybe on that note about thinking about how we do stuff going ahead, given the trajectory of what appears to be this is a question that comes from Barbara and can serve as our concluding question for the night regarding checks and balances between the different branches of government. Given the trajectory of the administration, the continued agreement of the Republican Party, is there a line in the sand for you? That is to say, is there any point at which you might stand up and tell them no? What is, in the interest of your people in Eastern Washington, what is your line in the sand?
In general, I swore an oath to the Constitution. It's very serious to me. I swore an oath to the Constitution before I went to Iraq. I swore an oath to the Constitution becoming a member of Congress. I would say that I understand this room is different than the rest of Eastern Washington, but you guys, you are. So I think, and I'm not saying you're being, I'm not saying you're being disingenuous in your heart of hearts, but you have a perception that America is spiraling to some kind of a constitutional crisis. Yeah. And by and large, while I would have some disagreements with President Trump on some things like tariffs and some other issues, by and large, what people of America see, what people of Eastern Washington see, is President Trump delivering on his promises. And so I take my oath to the Constitution very seriously.
Any closing comments? If we could have a moment for closing statement.
Guys, despite the disagreement, I mean this sincerely. I really do appreciate you guys coming out tonight. I appreciate Whitworth for holding this forum. And I would just say, going forward, you know, again, America is only going to survive as a republic if we all treat each other the way that we each want to be treated, and we all need to model the behavior of what we want our republic to be. Most of all, thank you for the students who participated tonight. You guys got a bright future. Thanks so much. Have a good night.